Hey everybody, welcome to Wizard School Episode 2. Episode 1 was the legacy cantrips and what they do. This one's going to be a deep dive on Brainstorm and what Brainstorm does for the legacy format. So Brainstorm is the best card in Legacy. I don't think that's particularly debatable. People might debate me if they want, but they'd be wrong. So Legacy format is defined by Brainstorm's ability to turn a bad hand into a good one. Brainstorm is restricted in Vintage alongside cards like Black Lotus and Ancestral Recall, and many have called for the banning of Brainstorm in Legacy as well. So let's look at the basic mechanics of a Brainstorm. So you cast Brainstorm, you pick up 3 new cards, they go into your hand. So now you have 5 cards to choose to work with. 2 of them have to go back. When you're done resolving the Brainstorm, you know what the top 3 cards, you have 3 new cards in your hand, and you know what the top 2 cards of your deck are. So what's so great about that? It's like a pay advance. Like, boom, right now I get to see my next 3 cards worth of turns. I get to sculpt my hand. So the best of my current options plus what I shouldn't have for 3 turns, I have all of it right now. However, that means that your next 2 draws are probably going to be unexciting because you keep your best cards, you put back your worst ones. And that's true. The top of your deck should be unexciting after a Brainstorm. That's what that card is meant to do. But I have good news for you. You might not have to draw those cards. If you can shuffle your deck after a Brainstorm and before you draw another card, you get that supercharge without having to work through those bad cards again. And Legacy comes built in with a number of ways to shuffle your deck pretty easily. I'm talking about fetch lands. So most Legacy mana bases are built on the interaction between dual lands and fetch lands. Each fetch land can get 2 different land types, and each dual land has 2 land types. So you get near perfect mana for pretty cheap. So this polluted delta right here, it can get any island out of your deck or any swamp. Look at the range of cards that this unassuming polluted delta can give you access to. That's every color of the rainbow. So you're playing Brainstorm because you like having access to good cards. You like to supercharge your hand once in a while. You're playing fetch lands because you like perfect mana. Those are 2 good things. But together, if you save your Brainstorm until you have a fetch land to shuffle with, you won't have to draw those cards you put back. So let's look at how this plays out. So we have a 3-card hand, cast the Brainstorm. Now we have a 5-card hand, we got to put 2 of those back. This looks familiar. We have a hand that is the 3 best cards out of those 5, and then 2 cards on the top. But instead of having to work through those, we can search our deck for a nice swamp or island and shuffle them away. Now we're drawing wild again. Could be anything. All right, so let's talk about when to Brainstorm. So Brainstorm costs 1. Having a fetch land available requires a land drop. So you need the 1 mana to cast the Brainstorm, and you need a 2nd land drop to have a fetch land ready. That means that turn 1 is not the correct time to cast a Brainstorm because you won't be able to shuffle right away. So despite Brainstorm being an instant, many of your best Brainstorms will be in your main phase. Casting main phase Brainstorm gives you the option to play sorcery speed spells right away. So if you have a couple lands out already and you think, okay, great, I drew Brainstorm, I'll cast it in their next end step. You miss your chance to cast Ponder, Tarmogoyf, Planeswalkers, Artifacts, Enchantments, whatever, anything that's not an instant. So if you wait for their next end step, you're not going to be able to cast those cards. That's a condition that's called end of turnitis. It's a deadly condition that a lot of Magic players get, where they wait until the last possible second to cast their instants, when sometimes casting them at sorcery speed is better. All right, so Brainstorm does not add to the number of cards in your hand. It just changes what those cards are. If you have a Brainstorm and one other card in your hand, when you're done resolving Brainstorm, you're still only going to have 2 cards. So there's the Brainstorm and 1 other. We cast Brainstorm, we get 3 fresh ones. We put 2 back, there's still just 2 cards in that hand. Brainstorm is used to improve the quality of a hand. If your hand is already good, or if you don't know what cards you need, you should wait to cast your Brainstorm. So here's an example of a battlefield where your hand is already good. Look, you have True Name Nemesis in play, that's beaten down. You have 5 lands already. That's a lot of mana in Legacy. And your hand, you have Counterspell in case they find an answer to your True Name Nemesis. You have Swords to Plowshares in case they find a threat of their own. and you have Snapcaster Mage to do it all over again. If you cast that Brainstorm, what are you even looking for? Your hand's already perfect. You're going to have 3 perfect cards plus a different card. That's probably not going to be as good as Brainstorm. But if you wait a turn or two, draw a land, maybe, you have enough lands. If you have an extra card that you don't care about, then it's time to cast Brainstorm. Cash that in for another spell. And here's an example where you don't know what you need. So it's game 1, you don't know what your opponent's playing, and it's your second turn. So you played Volcanic Island, Delver of Secrets on turn 1. Your opponent played a Scalding Tarn and passed the turn. You made your land, Polluted Delta. It's a fetch land. You have Brainstorm. That's the recipe, right? But no, not quite. This hand is full of polarized cards. A polarized card is one that is sometimes really great and sometimes really bad. Lightning Bolt, Wasteland, and Force of Will are all polarized cards. They're really great in some matchups, and they're really bad in others. And you don't know which one is which yet. So you got to wait for some more information before you make any decisions. So if you cast your Brainstorm right now, you put away that Wasteland and the Lightning Bolt, shuffle them away. You fill your hand with counterspells, thinking that you're playing against combo or control, and then they play Tarmogoyf next turn. Uh-oh. You really wish you had Wasteland. You really wish you had Lightning Bolt. You wish you... In the Delver Mirror, you're going to want that removal, that kind of interaction. On the other side, if you cast your Brainstorm, you put away the Force of Will. You put away the Tarmogoyf. Like, oh, I don't need those. And then turns out they're a combo deck. Or they're a control deck, and your hand is Lightning Bolt, and you only have 1 threat to work with. That's bad. So you really need to know what you're working with before you start digging for spells. All right, so what we learned so far. Brainstorm is much better when you can shuffle. Turn 1 is not the right time to cast Brainstorm. There is pretty much one exception to that. There are some combo decks that a turn 1 Brainstorm that could just kill you. If they're just one small piece away and it's likely that they'll find it in 3 cards, a combo deck might go for a turn 1 Brainstorm. But in general, if you're planning on playing more than 1 turn in the game, you should save that for when you can shuffle. Embrace your main phase. You're going to be a lot happier. You're going to have access to more spells more often if you cast that Brainstorm in your main phase. Save it till you can improve your hand, and make sure you know what that actually means. Up next, we've talked about how to get rid of those cards, but what if we put the top of the deck to work instead of shuffling it away? Let's see what that looks like. So it's not always necessary or correct to shuffle away cards from Brainstorm. Sometimes it's beneficial to manipulate the top of your deck. Some cards work best from the top of your deck. Here are 2 notable examples. Terminus and Entreat the Angels. They have a keyword called Miracle. Miracle means if it's the first card you drew that turn. In other words, your top deck. If you top deck this card, it gets better. And Brainstorm sets up your top deck. Other cards benefit from knowing what's on top of your deck, like Counterbalance and Predict. All of these cards are in one of Legacy's all-time best decks called Miracles, named after the Miracle mechanic. That deck's whole thing is just knowing what's on top of its deck most of the time and being able to manipulate that, and Brainstorm is integral to that strategy. Another way to put the top of your deck to work is against discard spells. Discard spells are powerful proactive ways to disrupt an opponent. So if you get Thought Seized, your opponent, 1, takes your best card, plus they have perfect information. They know what everything else is, and they can dance around it. But there's an old adage in Magic where you can't Thought Seize the top of the deck. And that's true. If it's not in your hand when they cast the discard spell, then it's safe. Brainstorm lets you put your good cards back on top to hide them from your opponent's discard spells. So here's an example of what that looks like. Look at this. Look at this great hand. We mulled to 5. That's kind of a bummer, but we have turn 2 Grizzlebrand here with this show and tell. However, our dastardly opponent has other plans. They've Thought Seized us. So what are we going to do about that? Let's brainstorm in response and try to figure it out. So we cast Brainstorm, and we get 3 new cards. All right, our important cards are our combo pieces. So Show and Tell needs an A and a B, where A is a way to put a monster into play, and B is a monster. So we now have 2 monsters, but only 1 way to put them into play. So let's put this Ponder back, in case we need it for later. And let's put the Show and Tell back, because that's the piece of the combo that we only have 1 of. And we have 2 Grizzlebrands. So now that Thoughtseize is going to resolve, and it has to take a Grizzlebrand. There's no other option. And we have another one. Then we untap, jam show and tell, Grizzlebrand comes into play, and our opponent is one sad Skeletor. All right, let's wrap this up. We just learned how to cast Brainstorm, when to cast Brainstorm, what cards we can play to turn the drawback into an advantage, and how to use the drawback to protect yourself from discard. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Brainstorm is an infinitely deep card. Legacy players spend countless hours just arguing, like sharing screenshots on Twitter, like what would you do here? What would you brainstorm? What do you put back? And sometimes many of the greatest minds in the game can't come to an agreement. That's how complicated this card is. And thanks for watching. Hopefully that gives you a jump start on how to brainstorm in your own life. Once you get good at these basics, you can start getting on Twitter and arguing about the fine nuances. If you want to get me involved in those conversations, tag me at Bosch and Roll. Make sure to hit that sub button if you had fun. Look for more of these videos. I have fun making them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.